everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be talking about when you should be servicing your bike, particularly if you ride it regularly. What I'm going to cross in this video is what you should be doing weekly, what you should be doing with a new bike, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, and 5 years. Let's check it out. Alright, so every week you should be doing at least these two things. Inflating your tyres. This is important because if your tyres aren't inflated, a few things can happen. You can run into the trouble of getting pinch flats, particularly if you're going over any bumps or anything like that, or if the tyre is really deflated, even just the weight on the back wheel can cause a puncture. And if your tyres are underinflated, it's also harder to push the bike because you got more friction on the tyre, creating more drag, and it's actually harder to push the bike. So having the correct pressure is going to prevent you from getting pinch flats, and it's going to be easier to ride the bike. The next one is cleaning and lubing your chain. This is important because it can prolong the life of your chain. Now, it's not a difficult process. All you need is a rag, run the chain through the rag just to get rid of any dirt or debris, and then apply the lube, and then grab another rag and wipe the excess lube off. Now, if you have a wax lube, that can be a bit of a different thing. You need to look at the directions on the actual lube itself, but general lubes, this is what you should be doing at least once a week. The next section of this video is if you've brought a new bike. Very, very important that you take that first service. Most bike stores will offer a first service within the first 6 weeks or 6 months or 12 months, depending on their policy. But my recommendation is if you're riding the bike regularly, do it within a month or even 6 weeks, because it's probably about 250 to 500 kilometers, depending on how you ride, is when that bike needs to be checked. So this is what you should be doing at 3 months. You can do this from home. It's pretty simple, but if you prefer your bike store to do it, go ahead. And most bike stores will be more than happy to help you out in this situation. First one, most important, is checking your chain for wear. Now, I've got a little tool here. This is quite an inexpensive chain checker. So what you've got a series of numbers here. It might be hard for you to see in the actual camera, but it'll start from 0, you got 2, 0.25, 5, and then it goes all the way around to 1. Now, this is a little dial here, and this turns, and basically what that does is these two little prongs here. This is a little bit off center. It's a bit hard to see that it is a little bit off center, but when you turn it, it actually, this pin here actually moves further away from there. It's not a very big movement, but what will happen is it will go on to, let's say it goes around here to 0.75. So it's on 0.75 there, and that's how we know that the chain is on its way out. And when it gets to anywhere between there and 1, that's when we want to be replacing that chain and possibly the cassette. Now, this is an inexpensive tool, anywhere between $20 to $40. You can get cheaper ones, you can get much more expensive ones. Ones that you use in the shops are a bit more expensive, but they're getting used all the time. There is 2 different types. There's this one here, and there's one that kind of just drops in to the chain to actually measure. Some people prefer these, some people prefer that. I prefer these because it actually tells you how far your chain's got to go, but some other people prefer it because if you overuse one of these, this little pin will bend and will give you a bit of a false reading. So that's the first one. Second one is sealant. Now, this only really applies if you run tubeless or if you're running sealant inside your tubes. You want to top that up roughly every 3 months to prevent it from drying out. And lastly, brake pads. It's not something you need to replace in 3 months, but it's definitely worth having a look at them every 3 months or so to see how the wear's going. And if they're getting a little bit thin, then maybe you should think about replacing them in the near future. Here I'm going to be speaking about 6 months. Pretty much everything I spoke about in 3 months also happens, but we're going to be doing a basic service where we check over the whole bike, more like a safety check. We're going to be checking the fasteners, we're going to be checking all the bolts, alignment of the wheels, gears, brakes, tyres, everything. Something that usually take about half an hour for a mechanic. If you took your time and did it yourself, probably be an hour's job, and that's something you only need to do every 6 months. So that's a basic service, and then we want to check tyres. Now, what I mean by checking tyres, we want to check for wear firstly, and we also want to check for debris. So if you got debris in your tires, like rocks or any thorns or anything, we want to go ahead and kind of pick them out where we can. Because what happens is any debris that sits in the tire, as your tire wears out, it pushes it through, and then eventually what's going to happen is it's going to go into the tube and puncture it, and you're going to end up with a puncture. So be mindful of that. So at 2 years, we've done our service a few times, and now the bike kind of needs to have a bigger service, or semi-major service if you like. So everything I'll talk about in 3 and 6 months. On top, I'd be replacing cables. Now, the cables might not need to be replaced. They might not be broken or anything like that, but there's definitely going to be some wear there. And I would want to be replacing those cables before they snap, particularly shifters, because if it snaps inside the shifter, that can be incredibly difficult to get out. And I've had to do it quite a few times, and it's never been simple. Sometimes yes, but most of the time no. And you don't actually see what's going on inside the shifter. So every 2 years, you want to replace your cables. Hydro fluid's there as well. So hydraulic fluid is corrosive and it can corrode your cables and everything. So we want to actually drain all that fluid out and put new stuff in there. Whether that's mineral or DOT, I would say every 2 years. Now, this doesn't need to be exactly on 2 years, but around about the 2 year mark. The next one I want to talk about is tyres. If you're regularly riding, you've probably had to change your tyres quicker than 2 years anyway, but if you haven't in 2 years, what's going to happen is the rubber's actually going to go a little bit hard, so it's going to become slippery, particularly around that wetter winter season. Tubes as well. Tubes degrade just as quick as your tyres, even though they're inflated. You probably want to replace it just to prevent yourself from having punctures. And rim tape as well. Now, rim tape is probably not super important if you're running tubes, but this is probably more pointed towards tubeless. The sealant will find its way underneath that rim tape, and it's going to cause leaks. So we probably want to be replacing that around about that every 2 year mark. Some people will do it with tubeless, they'll replace it every time they do their tyre, and that's probably my recommendation. But every 2 years, I think you should do all that. Now, lastly I want to talk about is bearings. Now, mountain bikes will have a linkage system. They probably need to be done more often than 2 years, but maximum every 2 years. But for general riding, you probably at least want to be pulling the headset out and greasing it, or replacing the bearings if they're a sealed system. Definitely replacing the bottom brackets and at least pulling out the hub bearings, greasing them and reapplying some new inner races, or if they're sealed, replacing it with some sealed bearings. They're an inexpensive item, and what will happen is if you leave it too long, they'll get seized and you won't be able to get the outer race out, and that can be an absolute pain, or it can destroy your wheel. So that's what I'd be doing every 2 years. Now we're going to be talking about 5 years. We want to completely strip and rebuild the bike. We're going to do everything we did in 3 months, 6 months, 2 years as well. But we're going to be pulling everything off. We're going to be cleaning everything. We're going to be replacing what we can. Depending on the price of the bike, it's probably time to upgrade and buy a new bike, particularly if you're riding regularly all the time for 5 years. But if we're not going to go down that path, we want to replace all the bearings. We want to replace at least the rims or the spokes, or if it's a cheap wheel set, just replace the wheel set. And we'll probably want to be replacing fasteners, derailleurs, shifters, you name it. The full rebuild of the bike. This is only if you're riding the bike regularly for that whole 5 years. If it's a recreational bike, I wouldn't be worried too much about this. I'd just be sticking to the 2 year plan. But if you're riding all the time, or it's an expensive bike that you want to hold on to for 10 or 20 years, then we want to be looking at doing this every 5 years. That concludes my video. I hope you've learned something. Hit that like and subscribe, because the next video I'm going to actually be talking about how to do a basic service, and I'm going to do one in front of you with my personal bike. So hit that like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.